Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Software Plaza podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Software Plaza, and I'm really happy to bring you some of the really innovative organizations from around the space of cloud native computing industry. And we talk about just what they're building, what they're noticing, and their take on all that's happening in the space right now. I have with me today Kerim Satirli, who's the senior developer advocate at HashiCorp, which is now part of IBM after an acquisition that happened some time ago. And it's been a while since we had Kerim on the show. It's been actually 2 years. So a lot has happened since then. And I thought we'd just catch up on recent happenings at HashiCorp, what they've been building, what they're excited about, and just find out what's happening at their end. So that's what I wanted to talk to Kerim about. And Kerim is just he's hot off of like a bunch of conferences that he's just been to. It's the season for the industry conferences. So Kerim, it's been a busy couple of months, I guess. You've been traveling around the world, attending conferences. How's it been? Which was your favorite? What was it like attending these conferences?
Yeah, definitely. It's been 2.5 years. Can you imagine it? When you reached out this time, I was like, has it been 2.5 years? Time really flies, and especially
Yeah.
with conferences happening. Uh, I think since we first chatted about this, I've been to three more conferences. Obviously,
Mhm.
everything is AI. We know AI is the future, and that's totally okay, but we're not there yet. Not everything works as well as it should, and that's a little bit of a problem. But
Mm,
we see the industry is trying to improve and make things better. It's not just marketing speak. There's actually a lot of good tooling coming out, especially if you compare to where we were in May 2023, last time we chatted, compared
mm,
to today. So much more has happened in terms of AI
yeah,
assistants that actually help us.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know. Last time we spoke, I guess ChatGPT was just making waves around the world,
Yeah,
and things were just about to really change for AI back then. Uh, Come full circle today, and now, AI has invaded pretty much every space. So, you know, uh, what are some of the conversations you're hearing in our space related to AI? And to dig a little deeper, is there any hype that you see, particular buzzwords that you hear, or particular concepts that you sort of, you say, no, not that. That's definitely not happening. And on the other hand, where do you see value? Where do you see people actually implementing, innovating, and actually deriving value from AI already, even if it's in some small way?
so one thing that you'll hear everywhere at every conference you go to in many offices is people talking about MCP. MCP servers
Mm,
specifically.
mm,
So giving your AI agent a way to consume data from a different system, not just through RAG, by ingesting documents, but actually
mm,
interacting with an API.
right.
Great, right? There's nothing better than telling your AI, do this for me, and it's actually able to do that. That is the future
Mm,
that, the Jetsons cartoon
mm,
show promised us like 60, 70 years ago. Speak to the
mm,
computer and get stuff done.
yeah.
Problem is, of course, you see a lot of these use cases where people just hand basically the keys to the kingdom over to the agent. So the agent has
Mm,
access to everything it needs, good justification, bad security mindset.
all
And
right.
definitely the first half of this year, you would not hear anyone actually focus at all on the security aspect. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you're an agent. Here's your root token to your AWS account. Here's your root token to, Vault or something. Just go with it. Let us know what you need. And it's a problem, right? We have this like demarcation line of like on one side, we want our agent to be useful, to be able to do stuff. On the other side, if we're working towards autonomous systems, we also need to make sure they don't have full access and the ability to cause, you know, outages and damage that is not easily restored from.
Mhm.
I'm glad we're seeing more conversations around limiting that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, MCP, I mean, definitely everyone is talking about it. And I see a lot of use cases around just like RAG and, like getting your local data connected to like a cloud API. That seems to be like a very prominent developer use case. Do
Exactly.
you see a lot of organizations as well using MCP beyond just like a developer laptop and using it for stuff in production? And what are some of the risks related to MCP usage?
I think without naming customer names, of course, because it's not relevant,
Yeah.
one of the coolest use cases I saw was a customer having MCP agents for a lot of different systems they work with. So in their case, it was HCP Terraform and Vault. So while they were developing and while they were interacting with their agents, they could query things about their infrastructure. They could figure out how do I get this secret in there. But
Hmm.
when it then came to incident management, they also had those programmatic access points. So through their infrastructure, sorry, through the incident tooling, they could use their infrastructure tooling to figure out, well, if our compute machine or our compute environment goes down, which instances are we actually looking at? What's happening? What's happening with the data that's underlying? And so, where before all of this was like a little bit of an exploratory journey, like you go into a dashboard and you figure it out from there. Now you just have agents prepping those notes for you. Kind of like a little incident scribe that goes and gathers all the right data for you. So when the incident happens, you can just look at the notes, trust that they're good because they're coming from an API, they're not hallucinated, and then just act on that information.
All right. All right. Yeah. I want to talk a bit about just the attack that we were talking about before we started our conversation earlier, that is just ongoing. The Shi Hulud attack. Tell us about it. Why is it new at all, or even if it's not new, why is it doing the rounds in the news?
So I'm I'll preface this by saying this is very much an ongoing thing, especially today. It's been I think like at this point 72 hours since it's been detected fully.
Mm-hmm.
And Shai Hulud is a supply chain attack targeting the NPM or the Node.js ecosystem. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, you'll hear often that, oh, like it's so easy, like Node.js always sees this problem. The joke there is, of course, like if a system gets used well enough, of course it becomes a target. There's no
Mm-hmm.
point in doing something like this for Fortran because, the attack surface is just not there.
Mm-hmm.
So um, at the current rate, we're looking, I think, at like 25,000 compromised repositories. And the
All right.
problem here
All
is,
right.
of course, we all consume dependencies, right? When we write any front end stuff, we might have some Node.js packages in there. If we have backend service written in Node, we might have some of these packages in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a problem. Even if we just use it for something like testing, once you get that repository or that dependency into your repository, that code may be able to execute things that you are not aware of. In this case, they use a hook that's part of NPM, the pre-install hook, to
Mm-hmm.
install a couple of things inside your Git repository, your GitHub repository specifically, and run a couple of GitHub actions, so like a CI/CD pipeline to exfiltrate data. This is a
Mm-hmm.
problem. I think Wiz reported just shy of 1,000 GitHub access tokens that were exfiltrated. Of course, AWS credentials and everything. And it's a real problem. No matter how well scoped your AWS credential is, you don't want to expose it. You don't want to leak it. And it's tricky. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so it's going to be exciting to see how the industry learns from this and
Yeah.
how we can crank up security down the road.
Mm. Is this a cascading attack? Like, does it have a ripple effect where it can gain access from one supply chain to another organization that relies on this organization's supply chain? For example, something like we saw in the previous years, like with which were the other ones? The SolarWinds one, uh, Log4j maybe. But yeah, is this kind of like on that scale?
It's hard to say because it's so early. I mean, 25,000, 30,000 repositories obviously is a big impact. And
Mhm.
for what it's worth, even if you're just exfiltrating 1,000 GitHub access tokens, that's still 1,000 tokens that give you access to repositories, organizations where you might be able to do stuff.
Mm.
It's, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how we define what the damage here is.
Okay.
Obviously, GitHub gives us access logs and audit logs so we can see how a token is used.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind where this will help us determine, how is this job running? Why is this job running?
All right. All right. Yeah, talking about supply chain security, that's something that you guys have been, solving for a while now, especially around products like Vault, which has been around for the longest time. And I think one of the recent updates with Vault is a feature called Radar. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that, what it does, and how it could potentially help in situations like this.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing to say when we're talking about the security space is that you can never just do one approach. Security always has to be something that is in depth. And I
Yeah.
think, especially for HashiCorp, we've always focused on workflows, not just technologies.
Hmm.
So while the best tools, will help you make for good workflows, they're not the only thing
Hmm.
that you can
Hmm.
use. But so let's
Yeah.
talk about Vault Radar.
Hmm.
Vault Radar is a, a detection tool and identification tool for secrets or
Okay.
credentials that you have in your code that might not be managed through Vault. What this
Hmm.
means is, let's say you and I work on a front-end project and we have a Google Maps SDK in there. This means that we need a Google Maps SDK API key. Now, super easy,
Hmm.
right? Normally, we would just put that into a config file, maybe a config.js, and now everyone can see that. That is a problem because one, nobody in our organization knows that this key is actually in this repository. And two, it means everyone else can see it as well. So if we don't treat this correctly, then that becomes a problem. With Vault Radar, we've got scanners that go through your Git repositories, that go through your Slack, that go through your Jira, find strings that match known patterns and
Hmm.
alert you to that. So imagine in our case, um, since we're talking about Slack, we built a Slack integration where we've hard coded the Slack API token in the code base. And I also shared that token with you on Jira. Vault Radar goes through, detects that token, creates a comment or a follow-up action in a system of your choice, and lets you know, hey, you've got a secret here that is a Slack token. I've noticed that one, it's not stored in Vault, so it's not encrypted. Two, it's not managed. Three, you might want to recycle that secret because it has been shown on at least two locations that are accessible to more than one person, or
Hmm.
whatever
Hmm.
your rule defines. And so using that, you can bring more and more stuff into Vault and more stuff away from being hard coded,
All right. All right.
which is, of course, good because anytime my data does not have hard coded secrets, it's one less thing I need to worry about.
Hmm. Makes sense. Yeah, that's quite helpful. And that's once it's been already leaked out, published somewhere, hard coded. But you guys, I'm sure, think even ahead of that in terms of like workflows and automation and stuff. So tell us about, let's say, an organization that's using the entire suite of HCP products, HashiCorp cloud platform products. What would they see? What would they most likely see even before hard coding the secret that would probably prevent it from even happening in the first case? Uh, what would that workflow look like?
So before we answer that, let's dive into this one problem that is so prevalent and yet so unknown. A couple years ago, I read this amazing study that called out that the average application has around 30 secrets that it deals with. A
Mm-hmm.
Google Analytics API key, a subscription key to some custom fonts that you have, all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff that you want to keep track of, not just for usage, but also because you paid for it. It's a license key, making sure it doesn't get leaked. And we don't think
Mm-hmm.
about that in the same way we think about it as, for example, AWS credentials. So having all of those available, just hard code it, sure, very easy approach, very bad for security. Vault definitely makes this easier. Vault has a couple of different security engines, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
secrets engines. So, for example, key value is a great way to store API keys. If you need access credentials to your cloud provider, we've got dynamic stuff that will give you a credential that's valid for 15 minutes, which is great, right? We've been talking for the past half hour at this point. Imagine we have a secret that got leaked. At this point,
Mm-hmm.
because it only has a lifetime of 15 minutes, that secret is already no longer a valid access credential.
Mm-hmm.
What was an actual API key 15 minutes ago, right now is a piece of text that is
Right.
completely harmless and looks like an
Mm-hmm.
API credential,
Yeah.
which is great. Combine that with proactive scanning of your code base, of your whole
Mm.
development environment, and you're just getting a little bit closer to having better security.
Right. Right. Wow. Yeah, interesting. So a bunch of different vectors that you can look at and kind of spot this issue earlier on, even before it likely reaches production.
Yeah,
Uh, Really interesting. So Vault, yeah, you definitely spoke about a bunch of different things that Vault does. I want to get to talking a bit about even Terraform, which is obviously your flagship product, the one you're known for. What's been happening with Terraform in this past year, let's say? What's some of the big happenings around the product? What's new? What can you tell us about Terraform?
God, so much new stuff has happened. I'll focus on the stuff that we talked about most at HashiConf and Hashi Days, because
Okay.
combining the past 2.5 years is just not going to be possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Terraform Stacks is available, generally available, which is a
Hmm.
great way to deploy complex environments.
Okay.
And by complex, I don't mean just your standard deployment of, well, development, test, staging, and production, but that times 6 times 10, even times 100, where you need to have multiple environments that are linked to each other, that are built on top of each other, such as deploy a Vault cluster, deploy a Kubernetes cluster. Step one, step two, configure the Vault cluster. Step three, configure the Kubernetes cluster with the Vault information. Step four, deploy actual workloads on the cluster.
Hmm.
In our head, that's a simple process, right? It's 4 steps. It should just follow the native pattern. Terraform should be able to figure this out. But the dependency graph for this is complex. With Terraform Stacks, this gets a lot easier where we have much more manageable units and find ourselves in a situation where it's not needing to have trickery of saying, oh, well, we'll deploy this one resource, then we're going to switch to the other project and we're going to do it there. It is just more tightly linked and more realistically connected in ways that make sense.
Mhm.
Now, of course, this sounds great, right? If you're deploying completely greenfield. The reality is, um, most of our deployments are not greenfield. For
Right.
years, people were like, God, I truly dislike importing stuff into Terraform because it's hard,
Mhm.
right? A resource in a cloud provider, take something as simple as an S3 bucket. It will have a location, it will have an identifier, it will have access controls. It might have file management controls like how long does a file in this specific path get stored there? When do we move it from hot storage to cold storage to actually ice cold storage? Glacier, no pun intended, like just the different levels.
Mhm.
Importing that by hand is doable. It's not great. With Terraform Search, we're working on ways to make this much more automated. So you can
Mhm.
import your existing infrastructure into Terraform, basically you write Terraform code to list resources, you select which ones you want to work with, and then you import them in a codified approach. So while we're just starting out with that, the ultimate goal is to make it much more easy to adopt your existing brownfield infrastructure and just
Mhm.
get there.
Mhm. Wow, interesting. Yeah, I think that has definitely, I've heard it, that Terraform is great when you get started, but then at scale, it could become a little cumbersome to handle when config gets complex and you've got a bunch of different applications with various different requirements. And yeah, that Terraform can be difficult at scale. So I guess a lot of focus has probably gone into just simplifying, making things easier, less complex. Would you say that's true?
I think that's definitely the case. It's for us, if you look at the improvements you've been getting for the past years with Terraform, a lot of them have made it so that my preferred way is still very much, clean account and start from there. But the reality is that only works if you're a startup. That doesn't work
Mm,
if you're a massive company who's now adopting the cloud. And for a while, we didn't have great tooling for that use case. I mean, sure, we could always write a couple of scripts to pull the API, even use Terraform data sources to generate a JSON file to do something, then iterate over it with Terraform. We've definitely had people talk about this at conferences, and what they built was great. It was beautiful to see that people had that much passion. But
mm,
it's that kind of engineering project where it's you and your direct colleagues understand what's happening, and everyone else has to reinvent their own wheel.
right.
That's not how Terraform should be. So I'm glad that with search and better import and removed support and remove blocks, we've got much better support in this area.
Nice, nice. Uh, Another important update with Terraform is actions, Terraform actions. I was wondering if you could talk to us about that, what it is, and it seems like there's also an Ansible integration around that. So, yeah, talk to
Ye-
us a bit about Terraform
Yeah, of course.
actions.
So Terraform traditionally is has been very good at CRUDL operations. So create, read, update, delete, and
Hmm.
list. Which makes sense, right? You've got an API you're talking to. Tell me what S3 buckets you have.
Hmm.
Give me the names of those buckets, and then tell me what files are in those buckets. Great if that's all you need to do, but sometimes you might have something that needs to happen afterwards, something that has to happen on a system level. Uh, since we're talking about S3, you might upload a new file to your CloudFront distribution, a CDN. And anytime you upload a new file to a CDN or it plays an existing file, you probably have a cache that you need to invalidate. In the past, this used to be something where you would fall back to the AWS CLI. You could do magic with Terraform to use a local provisioner or something, but it was always a little bit cumbersome. Local provisioners weren't part of the Terraform state in the same way everything else was. So while it worked, it's very much like the scripts we just talked about that people would maintain themselves, where it's like everyone is developing their own version of this wheel. With Terraform Actions, we now have codified support for an action that has to happen when something else happens, which is really, really cool because now you could say, we've uploaded a file to our CloudFront distribution or any other CDN. And once that is done, I want you to invoke a Lambda to maybe re-sign the the secret keys or something around that, or I want you to invalidate the CloudFront distribution for that specific path, which means Terraform just becomes more full service. So no longer do you have to find yourself leaving Terraform to complete an action that should be part of the Terraform workflow. And it's beautiful. The event and actions triggering around that is really, really efficient. You can trigger on specific events, like after creation, after deletion, and there's just a lot of good options. You mentioned Ansible. It,
Mhm.
of course, makes sense that now that we're part of IBM, we would have support for that. So imagine a situation where you're deploying a virtual machine. You've got the image pre-built with Packer. So 99% of the stuff that you need on there is already installed, right? You've got the right software, you've got maybe some of the right config, but you're still going to be missing a few last bits. Maybe
Mhm.
something like security credentials or keys that can only be deployed at runtime. And you're handling this outside of Terraform simply because Terraform is not the right place to upload files and do configuration management. So with the Ansible action, you can trigger Ansible to then interface with that virtual machine, connect to it, and do the final, 1% last mile configuration.
All right, all right. Wow, lots of interesting updates there. I'm glad we got to do this catch up. One more thing that I wanted to ask you was just Infragraph, another interesting update as well on just how and what it means for infrastructure. Just yeah, tell us what is Infragraph and what it means for managing infrastructure.
So Infragraph, I think the way I like to describe it is if you've ever looked at Terraform Graph, the what is it? The dot representation of, like all the dependencies of Terraform. You get
Mm-hmm,
like a little bit of an idea of all the relationships you have in Terraform. You're deploying compute. Compute has to run in a specific network. That specific network is maybe in a cloud provider's project. That project is tied to a specific region, and that region is part of an account that's part of an organization, right? There's
mm-hmm,
this whole like family structure, family tree that everything builds on.
mm-hmm,
Now, Graph was great to visualize that after the fact. The problem is it was very reactive. You couldn't do it before you did something, and you couldn't always see all the relationships. With
mm-hmm,
Infragraph, we're building a more interactive and much more relevant overview of that infrastructure. So no longer is it just what Terraform sees, but it is also bringing in other data sources like what do we see in console, what do we see in Vault, and other
mm-hmm,
systems. What's the stuff that is relevant to this instance that we're deploying? Uh, just as we talked about Ansible, imagine you're deploying your infrastructure, you've got a Packer image that defines what's running on your compute, Terraform deploying the compute, Ansible playbooks that happen after the deployment. So all of that information is relevant when you have an incident, when you have a need to know more about what's happening. Infragraph
mm-hmm.
surfaces all that information and obviously adds more and more information as the service expands. There's definitely some very exciting stuff coming.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really amazing. Yeah, that you can do these things now proactively before it actually happens. We've done like a tour of so many of these new features, and each of them seems quite important and useful. Which would, if you had to pick a favorite at all, which would you say is one that you would recommend everyone go check out if they're interested in, exploring the HashiCorp universe, or if they're already part of maybe just using Terraform or just using Vault, that they should check out this particular feature if they've not, and it would really change how they look at cloud. Which would you say is your favorite?
I think for me, it's definitely Vault Radar, simply because it is hard to understand how much you do with secrets until you actually run it. I like to think
Hmm.
of Vault Radar, and it, this is no disrespect to the team that built it. I like to think of it as a linter, as a code linter that tells me where I made bad choices. Just like, when I did front end work, I would run a CSS linter, and your linting tool will tell you, hey, here's 100 things that you did wrong. Now, at first, you might think, well, I don't want my tooling to tell me all the things I did wrong. With Vault Radar, it's not telling you the things you did wrong, it's telling you things that might cause a problem for your company. So these
Hmm.
are the
Hmm.
things that I want to know about proactively. So when stuff goes wrong, I actually have an idea of what I need to work on, or preferably work on it before things go wrong. Vault Radar, I
Hmm.
think, no matter the team, no matter if you're front end, back end, testing, operations, whatever, Vault Radar, I think, has the most applicability to all of these teams. So definitely go check that one out.
Wow, fascinating there. Um, we're winding down now. I've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Just shoot whatever comes to the top of your mind. Here goes. If you could redesign one part of the modern cloud stack, what would it be?
So redesign the modern cloud stack. Uh, I think tighter integrations between different services. So
Hmm.
it's always very clear what the relationships are. Sometimes it's not clear that a certain action in the networking stack will affect my compute stack in the way it does. Make those things more clear. And part of that
Hmm.
is surfacing information. Any cloud provider should give you as much information as possible to understand why did this deployment fail, and not have you go and play with networking interfaces and try to figure it all out. Make it easier
All
to
right.
recover.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. So you're a developer advocate and you spend a lot of time with people, with community. I want to ask, what's one misconception about developer advocacy that a lot of organizations and people have?
We're definitely not sales. Um,
Okay.
so develop advocacy for us at HashiCorp and IBM is definitely focused on making people understand how the tools work. And this is very important. Our
Mm-hmm.
mission at first is to help you understand what value you can get from the tools, and it requires authenticity. Sometimes you might come with a problem that we can't solve right now. That doesn't mean that we will never solve it, but being honest about that and going like, hey, you know what? I see what you're trying to do with Packer or with Terraform. That's not something we can do right now. But you know what? I'll take a note. I'll bring this feedback to the team and we'll triage it and see what we can do. That authenticity is crucial. We don't
Mm-hmm.
chase sales quotas. We want you to have a good experience with our tools.
Mm-hmm.
That also means, having the hard conversations. Hey, what are you running into? You know, are there any things that frustrate you? Tell us
Right.
honestly. We'll take that feedback and translate it to something the product team can use or the product teams and
Mm-hmm.
build on and hopefully improve.
Yeah, yeah. Very closely tied to product roles. Um, so yeah, a couple of questions about your conference attending. Finally, what's one favorite talk if you had to pick just one from all these recent conferences that you've been to?
I think last week at AI by the Bay, there was a lot of great content, obviously, around AI workings and the inner workings and everything. And the one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I loved hearing was build purpose-built agents. So don't build an agent that can do everything. You know, we've got this beautiful AI that science fiction teaches us to expect, where you can just say, computer, do X, and the computer will always be able to do X.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it- take the Marvel universe. The AI can do everything. It can open a door, it can, shut down a company, it can purchase a house. That's all great on screen, but that's not the reality. Having a
Mm-hmm.
purpose-built agent that can answer HR related questions is very different
Mm-hmm.
material, training material, and access to systems than an agent that can help me code Terraform.
Right.
So by building those with that specific goal in mind, we actually get better AI interactions.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. Last question for you on this topic is at a conference, typically you're the guy who
Oh,
complete the
oh, got it, got
sentence.
it. I'm
Sorry.
typically so no, no, that's I'm
Yeah,
typically
sure.
the guy that takes a second to think about of what I'm gonna say next. It is definitely the thing here. So I think the past few conferences was definitely a lot of speaking and presenting thoughts. What I try to do is present a topic, an idea that brings people in that state of mind where they think about what they've done and revisit maybe the initial choices they made. I try to advocate for a focus on security. I want you
Mhm.
to think about, how does this work in a team context, and also to feel empowered to one, bring new ideas to the team, but also leave the talk with the idea that, you know what, this is a hard topic, but you don't need to do it all alone. Reach out to your colleagues, reach out to your mentors, figure it out and build on top of that.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of this conversation, and I think it was quite fascinating. We covered a lot, and we got to really understand just Karim, how you think, what you've been working on, and just how you see what's happening today from AI to infrastructure to security, a whole bunch of topics that we've touched on today. And I think I came into this thinking, I want to just find out what's been happening, catch up on, what's been happening at HashiCorp and, its products. And I think we did that and much more. And it was really quite exciting to chat with you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks to all of our listeners and viewers as well for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if any of this piqued your interest, go and check out what HashiCorp is up to on their website, on their open source projects, on the communities. And yeah, get in touch with Karim. And if you're at one of the events, the cloud events, you're likely to bump into him. Fascinating guy to talk to. And that said, we'll see you on the next episode where we'll talk about another solution, another tool, or another open source product in the cloud native computing space. See you on that one. Bye bye.